Okay, we all love a good startup story, right? You know the one, the brilliant idea, the insane growth, the billion-dollar exit. But, behind all those shiny headlines and perfect social media posts, there's a much darker, way more complicated reality. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain and really look at the true cost of starting up. And spoiler alert, it's about so much more than just money.
And this quote right here, wow, this just gets straight to the point. I've burned through my savings, watched my relationship crumble, and pitched 300 times. The real cost isn't measured in dollars. See, that's it. The real bill for building a company from the ground up, it's paid in sleepless nights and relationships that are just strained to the breaking point. And with this constant grinding pressure that honestly most people just can't even begin to imagine.
All right, so let's start with the myth itself. That super glamorous story of guaranteed success that we are all constantly fed. The first thing we have to do is just understand the massive, massive gap between that public-facing story and the private, behind-the-scenes reality. So what exactly is it that we're not seeing?
So on the one hand, you've got the myth, right? It's splashed all over the tech news. The 20-something founder who builds a billion-dollar empire like overnight. But then there's the reality. And it's the painful truth that doesn't get any clicks. The huge majority of these startups don't just struggle, they die. They just poof, vanish. And they leave the founders with nothing but debt and years of their life just gone.
And social media, man, it's like pouring gasoline on this fire. Platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter, they basically become this success theater. All we ever see is the highlight reel, The big unicorn valuations, the major acquisitions, the new product launches. What we don't see is the founder having a full-on panic attack in their car right before a huge investor meeting, or them just staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning, absolutely terrified, wondering how in the world they're going to make payroll.
Okay, so let's peel back that first glamorous layer of the myth and get right into the most obvious cost, the financial quicksand. Because we all think we know where the money goes, but the reality, well, it's often a really, really brutal surprise.
So, where does the money actually go? It seems like such a simple question, right? But the answer is anything but. When a founder finally gets that first chunk of seed funding, it feels like winning the lottery. It feels like this massive pile of cash. But trust me, that cash disappears so much faster than anyone ever anticipates.
And it's not just about paying salaries.
Nope. The real cash drains are all the unglamorous but totally essential expenses. I'm talking about legal fees to get incorporated, regulatory compliance costs, and, especially for tech startups, server and bandwidth costs that can just scale up terrifyingly fast. I mean, we're talking about things that can drain the bank account way faster than payroll ever could. And that brings us to the other side of the money problem, actually getting it in the first place. Behind every single story of a successful funding round is a brutal, just soul-crushing grind. Think about Pandora. We all know Pandora, right? It's a household name. But its founder, Tim Westergren, was rejected by VCs over 300 times. 300 before he finally got a yes. Can you just imagine the psychological weight of that much rejection?
So what happens when that VC money doesn't come through? Well, the sacrifice becomes deeply, deeply personal. I mean, this quote here says it all. I was slowly selling off my Amazon stock just to pay for my apartment and pay for the infrastructure for the product. See? Founders aren't just risking some investors' cash. They are literally liquidating their own futures, selling off their personal assets, maxing out every credit card they have, not just for the business, but just to survive.
Look, all that financial pressure is it's immense. But honestly, it's often just the price of admission for an even tougher battle, the psychological gauntlet. This is the cost that you will never, ever see on a balance sheet, but it can be the most damaging one of all. Just think about this for a second. On average, you're going to face 20 no's for every single yes you get, 20 to 1. And it doesn't just feel like business, it feels deeply personal. Every single one of those rejections, from an investor, a customer, even a potential hire, it just chips away, piece by piece at your confidence. It's this constant storm of negative feedback that can literally start to rewire your brain to expect failure.
And all this pressure to be an expert in everything, we're talking sales, marketing, finance, HR, the whole nine yards, when deep down you know you're a beginner in most of it, well, that leads directly to this really destructive cycle. First, you're terrified someone's going to find out you don't have all the answers. So what do? You over-prepare and you delay making big decisions. And that delay, it costs you deals, it costs you hires, it costs you momentum. And the craziest part? The most capable founders often feel this the worst because they're smart enough to know exactly what they don't know.
And that brings us to the deepest and maybe the most devastating costs of all. The ones that are taken from your health, from your own sense of self, and from your most important relationships. This is the point where the startup stops being a job and it starts just devouring your entire life.
I mean, just look at this chart. This is not an exaggeration. For so many founders, this is their actual daily reality. 16 hours of work, 4 hours just spent actively stressing and worrying. So what's left? A tiny sliver for sleep, and basically nothing for your family, your friends, or for taking care of yourself. You are never, ever off. Your brain is always running, 100 miles an hour, even when you're supposed to be asleep.
And the result of that 24/7 reality? It's stark. Divorce rates among entrepreneurs are way higher for a reason. You've got this perfect storm of financial stress, constant distraction, and just being emotionally absent. You're postponing vacations, you're missing birthdays, you're there physically, but your mind is a million miles away. And here's the scary part. This isn't just a phase. For a lot of people, it becomes a pattern that the relationships just can't survive.
So while your relationships are fraying at the edges, your body is just quietly breaking down. I mean, startup culture loves to glorify the grind, right? But what that grind really means is chronic stress. It means flooding your system with fight or flight hormones that it was never designed to handle 24/7. And this leads to really serious health issues, anxiety attacks, digestive problems, you name it. Things founders often ignore until it's way too late because they start treating a simple doctor's visit like a luxury they just can't afford.
And this quote, this one reveals one of the heaviest burdens a founder can possibly carry. I had effectively blown $1 million paying people to pretend we were a big company. That's about layoffs. It's about the weight of other people's dreams. See, when you hire someone, you're not just filling a role. You're taking on responsibility for their mortgage, for their family's security, and the guilt of having to do layoffs, of knowing you're blowing up someone's entire life because your vision didn't work out. That is a special kind of psychological torture that so many founders carry with them for years. So, after we add all of this up, the financial drain, the psychological damage, the huge personal toll, we get to the final and maybe the most brutal calculation of all. Is the price actually worth the prize?
Let's just look at this table, because it really lays it all out. It's a tale of two paths. On the one side, you have the corporate career. Predictable income, a company-matched 401k, a steady way to build wealth. Then you have the startup path. The income is totally uncertain. A retirement plan? Probably non-existent. And here's the kicker. There is a 90% chance you will end up financially worse off than if you had just stayed in that boring corporate job.
And that really brings us to the final, most important question. When the sacrifice rewrites your personality, what have you truly gained? Because the financial risk, that's one thing. We can calculate that. But this journey, it often demands sacrifices so deep they literally change who you are as a person. It can rewire your brain, shatter your health, and break your most important relationships. So even if you're one of the lucky few who beats the odds and succeeds, the ultimate question isn't about the financial ROI. It's what's left of you when it's all said and done.